All right, good evening, everybody. So, welcome to the first Practical Chinese Herbology video webcast. Tonight we have with us Zev Rosenberg. Very happy. How you doing, Zev?
Pretty good. I was hoping I was going to be able to be on the Howard Stern show, but this will be a close second to that. So
We'll try to be inappropriate if that will make you happy.
no, I like appropriate.
Okay, very good. So we're going to interview Zev tonight. We're going to ask him all sorts of questions about his life and about his work and upcoming book and seminar. So I think what I'm going to do is lead in by reading a little bit about Zev so that you guys can get to know him. Those of you, there might be a couple out there who have not encountered Zev, although I think there's probably very few.
You don't want to encounter me face to face.
At this point, maybe not, right? He's got some years behind him and he's full of fire.
Can I hide while you talk about me? Or
yeah, you can. If you want to go make some tea, that's fine. So Zev is
enough tea for one day. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So Zev began his Asian studies. Let's try this again. He began his studies of Asian medicine in the early 1970s when he studied macrobiotics, shiatsu, and the theory of Chinese medicine. He's a graduate of the Santa Fe School of Natural Medicine and Western Herbology, as well as body therapies in 1976, and the Ku Shi Institute. Did I say that right, Zev? Ku Shi Institute?
Yeah, it's Michio Kushi was the guy. It was
okay. Ku Shi Institute, okay, in 1979 in macrobiotic counseling. He then proceeded to the Southwest College of Acupuncture in 1983 and has...
No, it was 79-80. I graduated in 80.
Oh, he graduated in 1983. Okay, Acupuncture, Oriental Medicine. Then he pursued a further postgraduate master's degree from the Emperor's College and graduated in 1989. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was for the purpose of getting a license in California, which didn't accept any schools outside of the state. Unless you're from an Asian country, you could just come and take the test even without showing any school.
Wow, that's interesting. California is still kind of tough, right?
Or buy the exam for $10,000.
You don't want to say it's all about money, right?
No, I don't want to do that.
No, of course not. So after that, Zev worked as a macrobiotic counselor for a number of years and shiatsu practitioner throughout the 1970s. And he'd been in full-time practice in acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine since 1983. And he has lectured widely, both to the public and to students, on both Chinese medicine and macrobiotics over the last 35 years. So there's a lot of experience here, guys. Listen very carefully to what Zev has to say. He's a former president of the Acupuncture Association of Colorado, where he spearheaded a successful drive for licensure in acupuncture in that state. And he served for 23 years as the chair of the Department of Herbal Medicine at the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine in San Diego, which he retired from in 2013. And at present, Zev is maintaining a private practice in San Diego or outside of San Diego. Or are you right in San Diego, Zev?
It's considered San Diego, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And he practices acupuncture and herbal medicine along with moxibustion, and his specialty is in chronic autoimmune disorders, which we're going to get into a little bit with him very soon. He terms what he practices full-strength Chinese medicine, which I'm very curious about. It's designed to manage and treat very difficult conditions. And he also directs the Alembic Institute, where he teaches advanced seminars in medical classics, pulse diagnosis, and the treatment of autoimmune diseases. So he's also a senior researcher at the Xinling Institute of the study of early East Asian medicine. So this is a very accomplished guest, and hopefully we have a great night ahead of us of good questions and material. So Zev, I think, like all good interviews, if I'm going to Charlie Rose you right now, how did you come to Chinese medicine? How did it intrigue you, and why did you choose that over, say, Western medicine?
It's not a very difficult answer, really. First of all, I never responded to Western medicine as a kid. I grew up with a lot of respiratory disorders. Every winter, I'd miss half the semester sitting at home, with coughing and colds and bronchitis. I was born with bronchitis. And so in the late 60s, when there was a huge consciousness explosion, people talk about the 60s, and the hippies and, the psychedelics and all that. And of course, the music was great then, but there was also all the cultural mixing and lifestyle opportunities. It's like it was the opening of what Bob Flaws would call the journey to the East, and it really was. by the time I was 15 or 16, I had read the Book of Tea, Paul Reps, Alan Watts, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, all these books. And when I was 15, 16, I went to the public library and got a copy of the I Ching.
Cool.
And the reason I got a copy of the I Ching was because there was a song by Pink Floyd, the version with Syd Barrett, called Chapter 24. And I loved this song, right? And the lines were, a movement is accomplished in 6 stages, and the 7th brings return. Under in the overcourse of heaven, things cannot be destroyed once and for all, and so on. And I happened to open up my I Ching, and there it was, chapter 2. The exact words. It was the Wilhelm Baines translation. I said, wow, this is really great stuff. And I just started really getting into it, and the hexagrams and all that kind of thing. And around the time, I also discovered macrobiotics based on a tip from John Lennon at Yoko. And I went to a restaurant in the village when I was in high school, and I tried the food, and it felt so good to my body. I told my mother, I said, this is how I'm eating from now on. And to give my mother credit, she started preparing the food for me. I used to carry these big bags of groceries. There were no other organic or health food stores anywhere but the village. There were two. One was called the Cauldron, the other was called Greenberg's. I take these huge bags of food home, and that's what I ate from then on. And then I started studying macrobiotics, which is based on yin-yang philosophy. And George Asao, who was the founder of macrobiotics, mentioned people like Ekiken Kaibara, who was a great Japanese samurai physician of the 18th century, and earlier on Li Dongyuan, the great spleen stomach physician. And he also started talking about herbal medicine, acupuncture. And then when I moved to Santa Fe in the early to mid 70s, I was in the health food business for a few years, and I wasn't good at it.
What specifically weren't you good at?
Business. I'm not a businessman. So I moved to Santa Fe, and I went to that little naturopathic school that you mentioned.
Okay.
And I invited this gentleman, Noboru Muramoto, his name was, and he wrote a book called Healing Ourselves, which was the first book in English that mentioned Chinese herbal medicine, and to some degree also acupuncture, moxibustion as well. And I invited him to Santa Fe to teach at a little restaurant called the Happy Carrot.
Oh,
so
perfect.
He gave me my first treatment with gold needles on my back, bing, bing, ping, 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 bing. And then me and my little group of friends, we had a little macrobiotic group there. We started experimenting with the herbs, and some of the formulas had Da Huang in them. So taking these herbs, right? Yeah, I feel so clean right now.
Those really worked, huh?
So I had a live-in study program where I used to do shiatsu.
Wow.
People would come with cancer, multiple sclerosis. I mean, I was so naive. I would have them live in with my family and everything. And
wow,
exhausting work. And then I had a futon business, and I wanted to study Chinese medicine more. And I met a teacher up in Boulder named Michael Brofman, and he became my my first real teacher of Chinese medicine until finally a school opened up in the late 70s. But I had one other delay, and that's that this school was a Japanese acupuncture school run by a former student of George Asao named Masahiro Nakazono. And looking back, he was a great, great healer. And he had a dojo in Santa Fe. And they invited me to come to class. And we all sat on the floor, seiza position. And I had studied a little bit about the Kodatama principle, which is basically 5-phase theory applied to sound. And he asked this question. Interesting newspaper article today. Japanese scientists find 4 types of blood tissue. This is very interesting, but what's wrong with his theory? So all the students were just scared out of their wits to say anything. They made foolish. So there's this silence in the room. So I raised my hand and I said, there should be 5 types of blood tissue, not 4. It's missing. He had A, E, E, O, U corresponding to the 5 elements, the 5 elements. I said, it's missing the E, which is the transcendent dimension. There should be 5 types of blood tissue. And that was the right answer.
Oh, man, you got lucky.
Oh, boy, did he get angry. He yelled at them for making an old man lose face, Mianza, he lost face. So he stormed out of the school and didn't come back for a few weeks. He refused to teach. And then I got my rejection notice.
That's awesome.
Later, they had decided to take me, but by then I was already in another school with a guy named Stuart Watts, who had driven down in a Volkswagen van with his hippie coterie from Vancouver. And came in and said, "Hey, man, I'm opening up a school." So we studied at the back of a dojo, an Aikido dojo. And I took my classes in the back room there. We saw patients in the back. It was quite a wild little scene, but it was enough to get me started. And then I got my license in New Mexico, but decided to move in Colorado. I was kind of railroaded to move back to Colorado because my then wife would not stay in Santa Fe or move to Tucson like I wanted to do. So we went back to Colorado. And I put up a shingle. You were not allowed to practice. So I opened my office 8 blocks from the state capitol building, started lobbying for a law.
Sure.
And I got an old retired Jewish physician who did brisses, circumcisions, to sign off paperwork. There was a law I've never seen any other state called the Physician's Extender Law. It was like Hamburger Helper.
Wow.
Any lay person can perform services for a doctor.
Wow.
So we were like 30 of us in the whole state of Colorado. So we got in on that, but we couldn't advertise. But the chiropractors were advertising as board certified acupuncturists. People think they have problems now with the dry needling business. So when I became president of that group, we went to their board and I said, you guys are puncturing lungs, causing bleeding. You're ruining the reputation of this really fine art. And we'd like you to do something. And to my surprise, I said, no, we agree with you guys. We're going to demand that chiropractors stop practicing acupuncture and calling it that with their 50-hour trainings.
Wow.
And then soon after that, we were allowed to advertise.
What year was that?
It was like 84, 85.
I was born in 84. So you've been fighting the good fight since before I was born.
That's awesome.
That's like when Pete Townsend goes on stage with The Who now and he introduced this song. None of you were born yet when I wrote this.
It's great. He's still got fans, though. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. So, so we lobbied and we got a law, but by then I was planning to move to California at the end of the 80s. So I didn't really get to benefit from the law, but within a year or two, I had 100 patients a week, which was insane.
That's
A
wild.
full herb pharmacy, raw pharmacy, granules, liquid extracts, everything. Wow. I had to hire 2 people to help me, and both of them were midwives, so I got to do a lot of obstetrics and deliveries, both in and out of hospitals, home births, hospital births.
Wow.
Quite an adventure. In those days, the hospitals were less corporate, so you can go in and out, do grand rounds with doctors. It was magic times, really.
How cool. That's wild.
We were so naive that we thought we could do anything, and so we did. But I had some conscience, so I realized, man, I really got to study, because I started getting the most seriously ill people you can imagine. Mm-hmm. Cancer patients, AIDS, autoimmune things from the get-go. Mm-hmm. I wasn't getting like bad backs and, tennis elbow. I had a little of that, a few skiing accidents, but it never seemed to be what it was. My calling was to be. There were other people who could do that, and mm-hmm. focused on that. Stop smoking, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I always was being challenged in terms of my knowledge level, to keep growing and doing new things. And I had to find whatever I could in English, and eventually I had to learn medical Chinese, enough of it anyway, to expand my knowledge base.
Would you say, to lead into that question, that you have specialized in autoimmune conditions, or at least the Chinese medical patterns that represent the autoimmune conditions that we see today? Could you talk a little bit about how that came to be? Was it just because they were so complex that you were drawn to them, or you just got very good at treating them? And specifically, which conditions do you feel?
The way I would look at it is that I think we have, as a society, a mass autoimmune disorder. Yeah. We're self-destructive. We're destructive to our environment. We destruct the foods, water, air that nourish us. We have these emotional things where we implode and we attack ourselves. It's more of a metaphor for a very wide range of things, all the way from allergies to rheumatoid arthritis and everything in between. I see it in a very broad sense. And I'm trying to deconstruct it and understand what's happened to human health, because America is not really a healthy society. I mean, people, as one doctor I saw on Facebook said a few weeks ago, people are not living longer, they're dying longer. What's the quality of life? You may be getting more years, but you're on like 5, 6, 7, 8 medications in the hospitals, in and out all the time. And, the cost of healthcare is going up, up, up. Unfortunately, partially because of that.
Definitely.
Like a friend of mine's mother, her sister died, sadly, of ovarian cancer in her 70s. So she got a full hysterectomy as a preventative to getting ovarian cancer. And it's like, this is preventative medicine? Or kids who get, ear infections, they don't even check to see if it's viral or not, and most of the time it is. They're given steroids and antibiotics. And this has devastating effect on young immune systems.
Zev,
Yeah.
I recently started to think that my toughest young cases, people that are in their early 20s or late teens or what have you, they're so sick, some of these people. And I personally have seen a correlation between that and prolonged extensive antibiotic use at a young age.
Prolonged what? I'm sorry?
I prolonged an early antibiotic use.
Oh, yeah, that's part of it. The other part of it, you're mentioning 19 to 22, is number one, for women in the Neijing, in the Suen, women go through 7-year cycles of change, men 8-year cycles of change. So 7 times 3, 21. 14 more or less puberty, 21 when a woman can start having kids safely, 28 full maturity. But 21 is when a lot of people are in college or a couple years before that. And for the first time, no one's watching over them. They sleep and eat, make love whenever they want, take lots of recreational drugs, Adderall, get exhausted, and you start to see immune system breakdown from that. I've treated many people like that. Like in different cases, if there's time. So you see that going on as well. But definitely over antibiotic use, just from a modern perspective, it kills the microbiome and alters it in such a way. That's one of our lines of defense. There's all this knowledge coming out about that, and the people who live close to the earth and treat things more naturally don't have a lot of the problems we're seeing. These are diseases of civilization. There's no doubt.
Mm-hmm. That's something. Josh, did you have a follow-up, or Steph, did you have any question regarding that?
I always tell patients that my younger patients are sicker than my older patients, and that's the trend that I've been seeing. I'm sure you guys as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see more mighty older people than you see mighty younger people.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of these older people, I feel like I'm dealing with like Wolverine. They make surgeons look good. They make me look good. And then you get some people in their 20s and they don't respond as well. They're frail. Not all of them are frail, clearly, but the toughest, most recalcitrant cases that I've seen were younger people as opposed to older people.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
I see that as well. But again, you have to look at the lifestyle choices that people have now, and it's that plus the upbringing and the generation of the food quality, the overuse of strong medications, as I said at the very beginning. And also, when I was a kid, maybe got 3 vaccinations, and that's it. And now it's up to what, 23?
And very quickly too, in rapid succession. It seems to be a very dangerous trend.
It makes me think about this concept that I heard in school, and I'm wondering if it resonates with you all, at all, Zev, if you've maybe spoken these words. But the idea that early childhood illnesses, I'm thinking of like measles, mumps, these things, that in my mind I have some teacher, I can't remember who I can give credit to, talking about the idea that this was heat expressing out of the body and that it was more natural actually to have these illnesses.
Yeah.
Viruses in general, like for example, roseola, which is like a milder rash than measles, you generally find that a child will have a growth spurt after that. As you say, it gets from what we call tidal fetal toxin that comes out to the surface. When my oldest child is now 44, so when she was young, we used to have measles parties or mumps parties, get him exposed, get it over with, and then manage it. It wasn't seen as a life-threatening, dangerous illness. Now, in so-called third world conditions, it can be issues of sanitation, so forth. You really have to know your stuff. You have to have educated families who are willing to commit to proper nutrition, lifestyle, home remedies, and know how to take care of small colds and flus. You can't just take someone off the street and deal with. That's the problem. Self-responsibility is a very big part of this. And of course, it's a very controversial topic right now, the whole vaccine issue. But my feeling is the over-vaccination of kids is one of the causes of the weakening, because they're not getting exposed to anything. The first sign of a cold, antibiotics, no mumps, no measles, no chicken pox, everything is being treated too fast, and then kids are getting sick over and over again. What happens is it goes from being acute and then heat expel to chronic low grade. And all of a sudden, because you've pushed the disease factor deep into the body, now in the yin channels, you end up with Shaoyin and Jueyin, and it starts coming out in the joints later on. The menstrual cycles get messed up, and you start getting like strange eczematic conditions in your teens. So I see this over and over again, and it's pretty scary to see. The good news is that we can do a lot to help people like that if they're willing to do what it takes. See, too many of our colleagues, they're too passive in the sense that they want to fit in, they don't want to make waves. They're just happy to be accepted and having patients and paying their bills, which I understand. And some of them are working in doctors' offices. There's a lot of wonderful, great things in Western medicine, but there's a lot that does need to be challenged. And the main thing that needs to be challenged is this over-treatment, this over-medicating of the population. For everything's a disease.
And I say that to my patients too very often. I'll say, you have to understand that your body and this particular illness that you've encountered are on a very different timeline than society and the schedule that you're expected to keep. In other words, this could take 7 to 14 days to fully clear your system under natural circumstances, but it's okay to let it run its course and watch it carefully. There's nothing wrong with that. But they're in their mind, if they're not better in a couple of days or one day or even immediately, they go right to the doctor, they get an antibiotic, and then they have to get right back to work, wearing themselves down further. Well, it's very difficult.
It's the lifestyle thing, and also the effect of circadian rhythms. There's been studies that show that teenagers, their minds don't really start working till 10 a.m. And if you have them in high school at 7, 8 a.m., it's like, it's 2 hours is totally wasted. I'm sure, I don't know. You guys,
that's how I ended up like this.
That's why I teach when
I'm out of bed, it's like, come on, you gotta go to school.
Actually, that's when Josh and I teach together. That's kind of how it is up until about noon. Wouldn't you say there, Josh?
Yeah. Well, you get 4 hours of sleep from the age of 5 years old to the age of 28, and it's not going to work right anymore.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, really.
So Zev, you have a book coming up, and it's entitled "Return to the Source." Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it's going to be published by Singing Dragon Press, released on March 21st of 2018. Can you talk a little bit about that? We're very curious about what this book is and its contents.
Well, right now I'm putting the finishing touches on the Pulse chapter, and the basic gist of the book, and it's taken me 20 years to get it into print because of this, is to fulfill what Einstein said, which is make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. So the most profound ideas take great complexity, because you need to know the complexity, you need to have a body of knowledge, but put it into a very direct form. And so in boiling everything down and in studying specifically the Su Wen and the Ling Shu, and for the last 5 years, and the Nanjing for 25 years before that, and teaching a Shanghan Lin course at Pacific College for 10 years. What I've done is, what I feel is, you always hear me talk about, Li Lun principle. just as in mathematics, in any science, any course of study, there are the hardcore principles which are simple but profound.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I had the Yi Jing from the time I was 15 years old. I'm 65 now. I can't say I fully understand it or how one hexagram goes to the next one and so forth. I mean, I could study it for lifetimes and still find profound wisdom and insight in it. It doesn't mean you just get it all, but there is, like in this chapter I'm writing now, what's the architecture, what are the parameters of the pulse? You know, why do we have 3 positions at the wrist? Where did that come from? Which, by the way, the Nanjing solidified that idea in the very first chapter. Why are there 3 depths? And by the way, there's a chapter in there where there were actually 5 depths for each of the 5 yin viscera. So you have this grid, and there are these things, events that happen within that grid, and changes you feel by moving your fingers around. So what's universal in pulse diagnosis that can help anyone who's using any system understand it, why the system they're using was developed the way it was? Like if you're doing Kampo, Japanese herbal medicine, why does it look like this? If you're doing a more Shanghan Lun style, why does it look like this? And in acupuncture moxibustion, why are these different ideas that sometimes seem contradictory? What are the root principles behind all these so that anyone could look at them, pick them up, and then get freed from being a follower of a methodology into someone who could take the methodology that they have and be creative with it, and even advance it. Because, you know, Chinese medicine has to advance. And we're not going to advance just by mimicking Western medicine and incorporating, however interesting and good it might be, functional medicine, et cetera, et cetera. We have to take the reins of our own discipline and move it forward, right? And that's not happening. It's not happening.
That sounds great. It sounds like you're providing something that I've been asking for. So thank you so much. I can't wait.
Well, you'll let me know if I succeeded in doing so, of course.
Well, maybe you let me have a couple follow-up questions on your work, and I'll be happy to do so.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Oh, that's good. So we're looking forward to that. That's awesome.
And long to write it. You know, it's not a very long book, maybe 150 pages, but it's taken me 20 years to be able to get it into print. You know?
Wow.
Well, we're happy that it's coming soon. It's going to be great.
Good timing. Good timing.
Josh,
it wasn't time yet. It wasn't time, but now it's time.
Apparently now it's time. So Stephanie, Josh, do you have some questions? Let's talk a little bit about Zev's line. I'm very curious to talk a little bit. Josh, you want to lead us in about this?
Yeah. Now, when did you? So you have a line called Alembic line, right? And that's with Khan, and that's.
I remember that line from many, many years ago.
When did you come out with that line? When did you maybe?
I don't even remember, man. I mean, I could go look for the little handbook and see when it was published. I mean,
I have it somewhere here. Damn it!
I don't want to diss any herb companies, but nothing's been done with that line for decades, and I've wanted to expand, but that's a whole other issue. Maybe I shouldn't discuss on the air. But
well, what about just the concept of tincture? The concept of tincture, then maybe.
Yeah. Well, liquid extracts. You know, Khan pine. What happened was many years ago. I've used raw herbs, granules. I like to use it all. Right now, because I'm solo, I can't really run a raw herb pharmacy because I'd have to fill the prescriptions myself, et cetera, et cetera. I actually lost a lot of money on my herb pharmacy in Denver because I had to hire somebody to run it and order it and everything else. So if I need raw formulas, I have to send out for them now, and I usually go with Spring Wind because their quality is so high. So. But around 29 years ago, Khan and one other company had been using extracts made by someone in Northern California, you know, the Ted Chapchuk's line at the time. And all of a sudden, they sent me some samples of a new processing. And I said, these are amazing. These are great. They have strong potency in qi. They're balanced. And I feel the herbs with relatively small doses. And so what I did is I was just moving to California then. And I flew up to San Francisco. And I went to the developers. The guy's name was Andy Miller. And a guy named Justin, whose name I forget his last name. And he had a company called HerbTech. And they started making me specialized extracts. And they also made for Khan. And I started testing batches of the formulas that I wanted to make for my own formula line. And the patient compliance is amazingly good.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, even better than with granules.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the results I need to get. I know they're very controversial because, the Chinese never use this method really very much. And some people say the alcohol changes the quality of the herbs, et cetera, but I just don't pay attention to that. I can't, tell everybody what to do and how to practice. I have no interest in that. There are different styles, different methods. This method has worked for me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I like. Like I said, the potency is very high. Because there is a small amount of alcohol in these extracts, the shelf life is years.
That's helpful.
Also, before I studied Chinese herbal medicine, I studied Western herbal medicine, and liquid extracts are the norm in this school of naturopathy. There are now lines like Herb Farm that all of you know. There are some natural food stores. I don't think many of those herbs should be in the natural food stores because they're very potent, but they're medicines. But they're quite potent, and so I think that was an influence too, using those kind of naturopathic extracts before I started using them in the Chinese herb things.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Stephanie, did you have a question about dosage or how we would dose those? Something like that?
Yeah. So you're using the herbal extracts now, or are you using granules mainly?
Oh no, I use anything at my disposal. I use both.
Both.
Well, but most of my patients like the liquid extracts.
And how do you dose going from granules to, you do it by drops? How would you convert that?
Dropperfuls, 1 to 3 dropperfuls 2 to 3 times a day is an average dose. But let's say you have somebody like with a zhongfeng, a wind strike, or Hamid Shanghan, or Wenbing worm disease, then I'll dose 2 to 3 droppers every couple hours.
And how would you write the formula like you would any other formula? How would you mix drops of each herb, or you would mix formulas together? How does that work?
I'm a very conservative practitioner in the sense that, I mostly, or I would say almost, I would say exclusively is not a good word, because I do write individualized formulas when necessary and for people who are willing to go fill them and do raw herbs. But I'm very conservative in the sense that I like to use root Shanghan Jingui formulas and Li Dong Yuan formulas a lot. I use formulas for other herbs, but I don't modify them enough. And if I do, then I could take a single extract and add it to an existing formula or combine formulas together. Like, for example, I'll often combine a famous, is it Ming Dynasty, Jingfeng Baidusan, half and half with Wendan Tang.
That's cool.
That's a really potent combination. I call it purge, wind, flip.
Yeah. Wow. So how do you adjust when you say like at 1 dropper full? What would that be in, say, a raw equivalent? Like how many grams of herbs are you giving someone, or is it kind of hard to?
1 dropper full is more or less equivalent to 1 cup of strongly brewed decoction.
Okay.
With the interesting difference that in the methods that Andy Miller and Justin put together, you don't lose any of the aromatics by boiling them out.
That's cool.
So that's very nice.
Do you find the aromatics are definitely damaged when we do the granules or when the granules are produced, or do they try to be careful?
My first granule company, I don't know if I want to talk about companies on the air.
Yeah, of course.
You can leave names out.
Yeah,
Protect the identities as possible.
More of a technical process question.
Yeah, well, the original company that I worked with, granules had no smell.
Okay.
And I said, there's something wrong here. Sure enough, the company's still around today. I stopped using them. And then Bob Felt got a line made by a Japanese gentleman named Nagakura, and he made the granules in his own kitchen. And a lot of the herbs were organic, and these formulas were amazing.
Wow.
Gold label, but then unfortunately he retired. And so I went over to like KPC, and Legendary has very good granules. The problem for me with Legendary is that you really need a fast turnover because the moisture in the air cakes the herbs. Where you live, you're fortunate. The drier air, you'll get the, but at least part of the year, San Diego, it can be, in the summer, it's a bit humid. In the winter, it's not, but in the summer it is. So.
And you find that affects the dextrin?
Yeah, in the Legendary brand. Not as much in the KPC.
Okay. Because they're using potato starch, or is that corn? I can't remember.
Potato.
Potato starch. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. Josh, did you have, Stephanie, any follow-up there?
Well, I have lots and lots of follow-ups.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah,
Just,
we have a couple minutes.
I'm gonna save something on some of these topics here.
Yeah.
Well, then I have to censor myself because I don't want to start, bringing up, some of these questions are off-air questions. I'm going to restrain myself for the moment when it comes to granules. But I will, I think the habit is, for me, my habit has been to obsessively, almost mathematically calculate granules into raw doses. And it started off as an obsession, and then it just became easy to do. And it's something that I failed to do with tincture. And I can't justify the math in my head with the tincture because I have to believe that when I add it up, which I've done, it doesn't come out the same way. It comes out low. But I have to believe that extractions 5-to-1 or 7-to-1 or 2-to-1 or whatever it is not really standardized that well because it could be by weight. It's not really done with not the thin layer chromatography, the other chromatography, the phytotography, right? So we never actually know concentration strength.
That's why we need people like you in the profession because you're, more in that sense, the scientist. But the medicine's also art. So I've learned over the years what works, what doesn't work. And it isn't so much trial and error like I'm experimenting on my patients, God forbid. But, I'm also, of course, taking herbs constantly myself.
Sure.
And I get a sense of what works and what doesn't work. And, I'm like a mad alchemist playing with different blends.
I'm the most daring with my own herbs, right?
Yeah, right. With your own.
So it's like you learn a lot by doing that. And also being in touch with people like, Ron Teagarden and his mad extractions that he does of like linger mushrooms and cordyceps and things like that. So that's my style of herbal medicine. That's why I call it Alembic Institute, because Alembic's a closed vessel, alchemic changes happen in. You put a bunch of stuff in there and you end up with theriac, as they used to use in ancient Greek medicine, So that's kind of like my way of doing it. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to team with someone like yourself, Joshua, who has that kind of mind, because I just don't work that way.
Yeah.
It's
my
strength and my weaknesses.
Well, trust me, your insights are more appealing to me than mine are to you. So if you're interested, I'm only more so.
Let's talk about the educational part, though, because you guys are now starting to get very successful with the educational aspects, which is, I think, great. I taught at Pacific College of Oriental Medicine for many years, was department chair, and I used some great books. I mean, like Formulas and Strategies remains a great book. It's like an encyclopedia of herbal formulas.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it was taught, the way that the board exams were, the school exams, the national exams were always about memorizing formulas and matching them to a group of symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
The TCM thing, this formula for this pattern, this formula for that pattern. This Western disease has 4 patterns, choose the formula. It's all database and there's no why, how, what, which is the most interesting and exciting part, at least in my mind, and of Chinese medicine and Asian medicine in general. The only thing that's been able to keep me going 35 years with the excitement that I have is that studying more deeply into where this medicine comes from, it remains very exciting. And to see the genius by which these formulas were put together, or, the whole acupuncture channel system in that discipline, it's just amazing and mind-boggling how they did it. But it's a different type of science. It's a different approach to life altogether. It's a lifestyle as well as a discipline. So anyway, I started to say, well, every physician who designed a formula in these books had a style of practice, like Li Dongyuan with the spleen stomach. And you see that if you know Buzang Ichitang, that if you look at all his other formulas, they follow a similar formulation style. Taojiang Ichitang. So he has a style of practice and a style of putting his prescriptions together based on his medical philosophy. You understand his philosophy and how he views earth as the central phase and the spleen as the stomach as the central viscous in the body. And the raising of the clear yang, descending of turbid yin, then you see how a system works, how he designs his formulas, why he would put in a supplementing formula something like Sheng Ma and Chai Hu in a small dose to raise the clear. It's genius. And when you actually try the formula, you see that, hey, it works just like he said it did 1,000 years ago, right? Yeah, there's something going on here. So you lose your modern Rudyard, post-Rudyard Kipling, the West, intellectual arrogance that the West knows everything. Before modern medicine was all the dark ages. How could they possibly know anything, those primitive savages? You know, you lose all that because you see they had a wisdom that has been forgotten and that we're not touching. And then you learn the principles, for example, San Yan 3, Yang 3 Yin, which is a whole other diagnostic system as the basis of the Shanghan Lun, in terms of not only progression of exterior contraction diseases, but internal diseases as well, and how they spread through the mind and through the body, and how the formulas are designed perfectly for those symptom patterns, how they're modified. The modifications are watertight and have been for 1,800 years. So I started to see that. So I started trying to teach the students, the great physicians, their examples, their theories, the historical progression from the Han Dynasty to the Qing Dynasty and the different physicians. Some of the commentators like Shenyi Xiaoyuan, whose books are now translated into English. And Formula Families, probably the first book that came out that was trying to push what I brought to every single department chair meeting and no one ever got. I'd show people the diagrams, give them out to the students. You know, Gui Zitong has 20 formulas based on it. Da Qian Zong Tong, Donggui Suni Tong, they're all based on Gui Zitong. Then you have the Chai Hu family, Xiao Chai Hu Tong, Da Chai Hu Tong, Chai Hu Gui Zitong, and so on. You have these formula families that started in the Shanghan Lun, and you have family trees. Add this herb, subtract one, you get this formula. Take this herb, subtract the one, you have that formula. This formula treats now this pattern because you've changed this herb. This formula treats that pattern because you changed that herb. It becomes a logical system. Miki Shima once gave me a chart put together by a Japanese computer scientist who was also a Kampo practitioner, where he made basically a relational database of all 180 formulas in the Shanghan Lun.
Wow.
Amazing thing to behold. And they're all related to each other, to the point where some Japanese physicians call the Shanghan Lun the book of Gui, the book of cinnamon.
Wow.
Because the very last section is the Jueyin section, and some of those formulas have Guizhitang. In fact, Guizhitang is mentioned as a Jueyin formula. The ending is the beginning, Taiyang. Because if you succeed in healing the Jueyin disease, it goes out to the surface, and it's now Taiyang again. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And the deeper you study this stuff, and even if you go back further than the Shanghan Lun, you go to the Sheneng Buncao Jing, the Divine Farmer's Herbal Classic, and the Tangye Jing, there are 5 phases. Each phase has 5 phases within that phase, which means 5 times 5 is 25 core herbs. You have wood of wood, earth of wood, fire of wood, water of wood, metal of wood. And there's an herb for each one within the wood, right? So you have the wood of wood herb, you have the fire of wood herb, and each one has an herb. And then you take those and you build formulas based on 5-phase theory. And that's all in the Tangye Jing, which now you can find fairly easily. And then that was translated into the Shanghan Lun. And then that was passed on to the Jin Yuan dynasty physicians. And then that was passed on to the Ming, the Tang, and the Qing dynasty physicians. And then it all comes together, and you have a unified theory and a unified body of knowledge. It's no longer, this formula does this formula does that. Why the heck does it do it? I don't know. I never heard of any of these physicians. So that's why people get frustrated, throw up their hands. I'm going to do supplements. I'm going to learn functional medicine, because they can't understand it the way it's being taught.
Wow.
So that's what's missing. And that's why we need guys like you out there teaching the connections of all these things, so that we, as you pointed out on Facebook today, we could bring herbal medicine back into the forefront of Chinese medicine, because without herbal medicine, it's not Asian medicine, right? I think I practice acupuncture every day. I love it. But I do an internal medicine style of acupuncture. that
Mhm.
complements the herbal medicine. And it's also very profound for treating internal disease if you practice it the right way. But the way that our profession has been marketed, no wonder there's people trying to rip it off, because it's, well, now we got to compete with a physical therapist. Well, 35 years ago, we were competing with the chiropractors and the MD 550-hour courses. That's nothing new. But if you really study where this medicine comes from, no one could touch you. No, you're 10 million light years ahead of these people. And your patients get so much better, no one's going to care if they're doing it because they'll laugh. It's like a monkey jumping up and down in a suit thinking that they're Rudolph Valentino.
So hopefully you're gonna be open to teaching this type of material.
Yes, that's the next question.
I'm trying to do.
Because otherwise, you're gonna have to wait years for me to try to catch up a little bit, Zev.
We say in Hebrew, if you know Aleph, you teach Aleph. If you know the first letter, teach the first letter.
I got Aleph down pretty good.
Yeah, to Gimel, to Dalet, and then you get the whole picture. You have to teach in order to learn, and then you learn in order to teach. It's something that's never stopped for me, and hopefully never will.
So Zev,
Yeah.
because this isn't maybe it's not being taught, or our students aren't being reached at this capacity and really being taught to appreciate the levels to which this medicine is capable of delving. And postgraduate work still seems goal oriented in the sense that we're trying to get through to the next degree, a doctorate, and it has these requirements. Have you taken it upon yourself, or is there a willingness in you still, despite your retirement from official education?
I'm not retired.
From
a master's teacher.
Yes.
Teaching
Right.
curriculum. That I'm retired from, but I'm teaching more intensely than ever, I think.
And so there is a willingness in you still to help those of us who really do want to deepen our knowledge through seminar, through webinar, to really continue teaching as long as you can, because
sure. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I think we're going to see.
Champ has any juice left in the tank?
No, I know he's got juice in the tank.
No problem with that. Trust me.
That's good to know, because for so many of us, we had cursory exposure to this, even if it was studied to what we felt was some degree of depth in school. The things that you've exposed here tonight are concepts that I've never even heard of, in terms of the depth that this could go. And it made me very excited. I was spellbound. Actually, I'm fascinated. You have me.
Fascinated is what inspires us to keep growing. I'm still being fascinated by what I learn. If I look at something like Chen Xiaoyuan, Chinese medicine databases translate some of his commentaries on the Divine Farmers Materia Medica, and there's all kinds of good stuff out there. Commentaries on the Jingui, the Golden Cabinet, and it's like I put myself up next to him and said, "Man, I'm just a little miniature of him. Not even up to this guy's heel." What depths of knowledge that are there. It's such incredible wisdom. It's really what we could call natural science. The Chinese really observe everything carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ripples of the wind in the leaves in the autumn, and the leaves are more brittle, means that the human body is also a little bit more tenuous and brittle, and the tissue that relates to those leaves floating on the rippling on the leaves is the lungs, and you have to deal with the lung qi and moisten it and protect it. And it's like a whole logical system based in nature. And it's like, wow. And the most important thing is that it works.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
To prove that Chinese medicine is the same as Western medicine is a colossal waste of time and energy.
And money.
It certainly is complementary to it. We certainly can work together with Western physicians and other disciplines as well, naturopaths, Ayurvedic practitioners, homeopaths. There's definitely room for cross-fertilization, but man, we got to master our own medicine first, and people think they have and they haven't.
Zev, what's our first step, stepping back from all of this as practitioners that are coming out of schools that are trained to pass board examinations and aren't necessarily being grounded or rooted in this material? Where do we start? What's our best place?
The best place, I like this saying that's in Ayurveda. The Ayurvedic physician, I don't remember his name, said that the classics are like a vast ocean, and the physician is like a diver looking for pearls. He immerses himself in the water, finds a pearl. You can find sometimes one line or one paragraph in one of these books that'll sustain you for months and inspire you to do all kinds of incredible clinical things.
Wow.
Right? Like the very first time I had that experience was in my clinic in about 84, 85. Back then, there were so few people doing this medicine that I had people flying in from places like Dallas, Texas into Denver. And this is a woman with like simple lower back pain, but it was more than that. There was something psycho-emotional going on there. And I tried, the standard back points and, Juan Tiao, gallbladder 30, et cetera, and it wasn't responding. I felt really bad. And even back then, I was already studying whatever I could. And I found this quote from the Neijing in this acupuncture book called A Comprehensive Acupuncture Text, published by Eastland Press. And it said, all pain is associated with the heart. So that's interesting. Yes, the perception of pain. So the next time I saw her, I didn't do the back points. I just needed kidney 6 and heart 5. And all the pain went away.
Wow.
I said, yeah, onto something here. So after that, I kept looking for those unconventional wisdoms that were buried in the medicine and trying to apply those. And when I tried to be conventional, at least for me, it didn't work. When I really found, when I connected with what I had a tea with, maybe you know him, Ken Cohen. He's like, he spends part of the year in the mountains outside of San Diego now. He said, what I like about your table of contents is that you're doing a section on Ganying, and that's really the focus of your book, Ganying resonance. Everything resonates with everything else. And this is also a principle of modern physics. So finding that resonance and what connects, and not only will it help heal the patient, it will turn them onto themselves. They'll be more self-aware, and you will be vitalized by it. You won't lose your chi. Like, you have demanding, oh, I hurt here. Oh, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to do it again. Put the needle here. Oh, here, I'll give you a dose of this. That kind of, let's do a tap dance and entertain the patient type of thing. That's exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
Well, when you connect with people and work with them and give them self-awareness about their conditions and then work within that space, there's an exchange of what we can only call chi. I mean, what the hell is this taking chi out of our medicine about? I mean, what's wrong with chi? Let chi be.
I just saw a T-shirt, Zev.
Yeah.
I just saw it.
Let chi be. It is
Let
pretty
chi.
slick.
Let chi be.
It's like, I have to give it a Western definition. I have a good friend who's, unfortunately, he's a physicist. He should know better than this. Your medicine, it's based on these really fuzzy ideas like chi. Can you define chi for me? I said, okay, here's my medical dictionary. Here's 29 definitions of chi for you. Chi has to be qualified by how you're using it, by yin, by wei, defense construction, by zheng qi, correct qi, xie qi, evil qi. And here's a regular Chinese dictionary for just, even outside the medicine. Look at all these uses of chi. You can use chi in aeronautics, in science. You can use it in using syringes. I mean, chi is just a universal qualifier for, you could say, life force if you want. You're going to take that out of the medicine, it's going to be as dead as anything else that's out there. It's like, this is a medicine of life, living matter, not dead things under microscopes and in test tubes,
I think that the resistance to chi might have to do with it being actually funneled away from all those concepts and its breadth and the possibilities of it, in simply declaring it an energy, right? Not to say it's not an energy, but
chi is not energy. It's much too limiting a definition.
Exactly.
When most people think of energy, they think of like protein bars, or they some scientific thing like Einstein, and it's definitely not that either. I agree. When people say it's not that, I agree with that. Yeah, but that's already 30 years ago. Paul Unfold killed that idea. It's nothing new.
Well, we're not learning from the past apparently, because it's it's still a struggle, it seems.
Yeah, well, again, that's the problem with the education. It's you have to pay teachers enough. You have to pay them a living wage if they're going to prepare classes and exhaust themselves teaching students. And It's just not happening in most of the schools. There are a few schools that I think compensate their teachers better, but a lot of the teachers get burnt out. I mean, I was fortunate. I just taught 1 or 2 classes. There was a point I was teaching. I had a full clinic, 55 patients a week, and I was teaching 3 nights a week with 2, 3 small children. And I got really sick. This was like 20 years ago. I changed my tune after that. Man, I'm not doing that again. I had a flu that lasted for 6 weeks. I couldn't shake it.
It's challenging. It is, because you are interacting with your own life and your own stresses, and then dealing with your patients as well.
Well, let me tell you a little story too. We also are dealing with the entitlement generation. There's some wonderful young people out there. I don't mean, God forbid, to buttonhole everybody, but I was at a conference a couple years ago. There's this great teacher out of China who teaches a Jingfang herbal system, Suzanne Robidoux. In fact, she's coming to this. She's going to be here in San Diego at Pacific Symposium. And she gave a beautiful presentation. In fact, I invited her to come and speak at this symposium a few years ago. And she described a case of, she was in Italy at the time visiting. She travels around the world. She has a website, Chinese Medicine Traveler. And there was this guy who had like terrible, you could say like a small intestine heat pathology in Chinese medicine. And, bleeding in the stool, severe in the Western sense colitis. And the doctors couldn't do anything for him. They told him he was going to die because he would, every time he go to the bathroom, it's like a puddle of blood, right?
He's getting transfusions, right?
Yeah. So she came to see him, checked him out, and just started doing very advanced Moxa technique on his abdominal points and some distal points. One treatment slowed the bleeding down to bearable. By the 3rd treatment, the bleeding completely stopped. He saved his life. But they had the Moxa treatment lasted an hour and a half to 2 hours. Right? So one person stands up and makes a comment. Can you teach me something more practical? I don't have time to do that on my patients. You idiot. She saved the guy's life. You don't want to take an hour and a half to save someone's life. Do something else.
Yeah.
It's not for your convenience. We're here to help people. I put doing house calls at 2 a.m. over the years. I don't do it now, but I used to. You want to get people well. You got to, like Sun Tzu Miao said, got to climb that mountain through storm and rain and frost and snow to help people.
That's my favorite.
The person gets up. Can you use a darker marker? I can't read your board. The 3rd person gets up. That won't work in America. In America, acupuncture is a business. This is what we're dealing with. I hate to do like in-group stuff and chuckle and laugh, but I mean, I really wonder why people want to be in this field if those kind of attitudes. I mean, there are a lot of gems. Don't get me wrong. There's a good core of people who really are sincere and serious and want to know more and want to learn it. And I think all of us are there devoted to really helping them get there. But then if you have people like that who can take such an incredible teacher and her precious knowledge and just show such disrespect, be so glib about it, it just blows my mind. And that was 4 years ago, and I still can't get over it.
The Kung Fu guy in me is just like, nauseated. Nauseated by this poor studentship here.
You just won a disciple for life in Josh with that whole thing. I promise you that.
What's that?
That's just Josh. That was Josh in a nutshell. You gotta go. You gotta push through. You gotta.
Well, you started with Sun Tzu Miao, who's one of my favorite historical Chinese physicians. And then you went into the struggle, which I have to respect, of course. And, sometimes it feels like you're climbing a mountain to treat the sick.
And you love that.
I loved it.
Zev, you tugged his heartstrings.
See, Michael knows me well. So I won't expound, but yeah, you got it. That's it.
Well, there was a great physician, Yu Chang, and his motto became my motto, which is the goal of medicine is to move a mountain with a feather. There may be sometimes you really have to roll up your sleeves and do hard work, but there's other times you just hit that right point with the right herb, the right needle, and everything clears. It's like the clouds separating from the sun and the light comes through. That's what makes it really worthwhile when that happens.
It is. on that note, we don't want to hold you much longer. It has been our hour, and I want to thank
I
you
forget
so much.
when I'm doing these things. It's so much fun.
Well, we really appreciate it. We'd love to have you back. I have a whole bunch of more questions that I would love to ask on a different segment. But thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It was
Sure.
fantastic.
Well, Stephanie's been very quiet. I just want to see if she has any more.
Yeah, I was going to close with that.
Well, I don't want to take up too much time, but are you matching pulses and herbs, and are you doing a Shang Han Lun style pulse diagnosis?
That's an excellent question. And I studied seriously Shang Han Lun. My only recent program that I took was with Arno Drislu's ICEAM.
He's awesome. Yeah.
Got a diploma from that, and the reason was because I was very interested in Shang Han Lun and Jin Gui, and he was the best teacher I found, and I got a lot out of it. I highly recommend his teaching. But on top of that, I would say that I don't follow anyone's Feng Shui. I don't follow anyone's method. I have my own, which is a synthesis of everything I've studied all these years into something that works for me, and that's what everyone has to do. Chinese medicine, I think when you look on Facebook, it seems like people are very afraid that if they read the classics, they're going to get rigid and they're going to be stuck. It's just the opposite. It liberates you because you have principle, Li Lun, to fall back on, to be creative. So really, I have my own style of pulses. I think I kind of described getting the basic dimensions of it, but I've also gotten the honor to study with Tibetan physicians such as Yeshe Dundan, who was the Dalai Lama's physician.
Yeah.
Not extensively, but enough to really get the gist of his system. Dr. Vasant Lat, who was teaching at my acupuncture school at the time, who's like the most famous Ayurvedic physician in America. And my first teacher, Michael Brofman, who taught me a Nanjing system of pulse taking. And then I read the Nanjing 25 times to get it down. And of course, it was not easy to do, but I was finally, after many years, was able to put it to use. You synthesize what you learn. You don't reject anything. You find what really suits you as a practitioner with your patient. As long as it's based on yin-yang, 5-phase, pulse diagnosis, basic principles of combining herbs together, acupuncture using channel theory, I think the sky's the limit, really.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I'm like one type of practitioner. I'm just do what I do, my own approach to the medicine.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. It's a great answer. Well, thank you, Zev, so very much. And Zev does have, next year, we are working on an autoimmune seminar with Zev, a live seminar. We'll have more details about that on the Practical Chinese Herbology page, which all of you are currently members of that are watching this. So thank you all for tuning in tonight, and thank you again, Zev and Josh and Stephanie for co-hosting. And we'll do this again. It was a great time.
So Michael, of course, is going to have to come up with a really cozy location for me to teach.
Yes, well, that's the holdup, Zev. It has to be just the way you want it, and I'm fine with that.
Well, what I found over the years, it's kind of like I posted the other day about the Xiaoyang room at our school.
Yeah, right.
Synagogues I've been in, airless hotels. I just taught at a conference in Austin, Texas, and it's like the air is off and there's no air to breathe, and everyone is sweating. There's no windows. Everything's made of plastic. And then they put the air in the and you're freezing. You're chilled. You're shaking.
I always tell.
You haven't seen them like they, it's
we just dealt with that in Chicago. The same thing. It was freezing and broiling.
I can't stand it, so I won't do that anymore.
I think it's a Chinese medicine thing, Zeb, because I've been saying since 7 years ago when I froze up my first patient in student clinic, I said, I vowed to never freeze another patient, and I have failed.
Because you have no control of your environment. That's the reason I work at home, because my windows are open. I can control. I have fans. I don't have to use air conditioning. So it really makes a big difference. But when I travel, it's like it's bad enough you have to sit in a metal tube rocketing through the air at 500 miles an hour. You have to have some kind of routine, some kind of yogic thing you can do, a comfortable place to sleep, good food, and be able to teach an environment where you're in touch with, hey, look at these trees out here. Look at the sky. I mean, it's horrible to teach in airport hotels. I don't know how anyone can do it.
It's sometimes it's a horrible necessary evil because people are picky. But I will say, Zev, maybe we'll make this a camping trip, and you can teach at Logan Pass and Glacier Park on Hidden Lake. That
Don't
should do it.
A nice old building in Missoula with
I can find you something.
Yeah,
You bet.
windows. You know.
I can find you something.
Right, next August, I'll make a little advertisement. Sabino Vilms and I, who's one of our best trainers, and we're going to do something in Taos, New Mexico,
Awesome.
at the Red Wing Warehouse.
Oh, cool.
Beautiful setting, solar, everything else. And we're going to go every morning into the mountains and find herbs that are in the Chinese Materia Medica. I found 30 the last time I did that. In the
Wow.
afternoon and evenings, we're going to do classes on the Su Wen and the Shanghan Lun and whatever else strikes us.
Is it
I
this
like
October
it.
or next October?
Next August.
When it's August. Oh, great, fantastic.
I love it.
Plan, so we're
Make sure
working
you give
on-
us that
Yeah,
information.
Yeah, that'll be ready in January, so we have some time.
All right,
That's
fantastic.
fantastic. Well, very good. You guys all set? Everyone, any last minute questions? We're going to let Zev go on with his evening.
You too. It's later
Thanks.
for you guys. Live long and prosper.
Thank you, Zev, so
Thank
much.
you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you
Have a
so
good
much.
night.
Thanks.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.